Hey, hi, hello. Welcome back to the news tonight. The date is January 30th, 2026. I hope uh, this recording finds you well in the post apocalyptic landscape of whenever you're watching this, be it 5 minutes from now, 5 minutes from me uploading it, or 5,000 years in the future. Uh, I don't mean want to I don't want to be one of those doomsayers, these black pillars, if as they're known on the internet, uh, but stuff is getting crazy, and it's not gonna get less crazy. Like 2016, people thought 2016 was like the apex of craziness, and we've had 10 years of like nonstop hold my beer, you know. Today's episode, uh, you know, today's episode is going to be about our reaction to that and how, it's almost seemingly pre-programmed, predestined, or at least predicted for sure by the people in power. And there's a system of control which, you know, a lot of people ultimately reduce religion to as a system of control, brainwashing, mind control, right? We're finally getting to what this episode's main theme will be about. I would hesitate to call this a religion, but it's definitely been they've taken the skeleton of a religion and put it into logical and technical practice. They've removed spirituality from it and turned it into a machine. And um, depending on the circumstance and the person, I would say it works. Uh, Today's episode is going to be about MK Ultra. The date is January 30th, 2026. This is your news tonight. With your host, Gilbert Chavez. It's been linked. I don't know. It'll be hard to do a revelation of the method episode because there's so much copyrighted material. But I'm sure I can find a way to like flip that and skew it to people listen to whole albums right on stream and upload it. So um, maybe your first most recent encounter with the notion of like uh, ad hoc mind control would be like street magic. This is what I was gonna say, but you could say street magicians are one example of that. But I was gonna say if you've seen the movie Get Out, right? So Jordan Peele's Get Out. The premise is a black man and his white girlfriend are visiting the white girlfriend's family for the weekend, and it turns out that they're into like psychological, biological experimentation that involves basically suppressing the consciousness of an African American person and installing the consciousness of a white person into that black person's body, which at the time was just such a bizarro, surreal concept for mainstream America that it like skyrocketed Jordan Peele into this like position that he's in now, into this like uh, uh, he credit is what credit is due. He's a great filmmaker. He's a great comedian. He's been in the business for a long time. Um, art is subjective, Uh, everybody can look at art and see a different thing, and everybody can consider different things art. Um, I guess most recently I've been introduced to the concept that that's been used to destroy the novelty of art. But say all that to say that in Get Out, whether no matter what philosophical take you're trying to take away from it, the main uh, method of perpetrating these crimes and like atrocities on black people is with hypnosis. And in the movie, the family's matriarch, and the method has been passed down through the family, by, like generations or whatever. She's hypnotizing the protagonist of the story with the teacup. She's spinning a spoon with a teacup while she's talking to him, and she's a therapist. The main character knew she was a therapist, and he kind of was hesitant about getting into his past because he had trauma or whatever. And I guess that's what this family preys upon too. People who've been traumatized, they get into your head. You get into that place where you don't want to talk about the trauma. You get trapped there, and then you become a vessel for whatever they want to install in you, and that's what they do in the movie, at least for the fantastical part of it. But this notion of hypnosis and mental installation, it wasn't new in Get Out. If you go back to Denzel Washington's The Manchurian Candidate, which I wanted to see before I started this episode. I saw it a long time ago before I even really was keen to the concept of what Manchurian Candidate was, and I kind of got the gist of it from my rudimentary understanding of the world at the time. It was like this guy was like obviously brain controlled to mind washed to believe things and do things that he doesn't even remember or didn't want to be a part of, and they lied to him about it. But the ones that were lying to him about it were the ones that were doing it to him. It's my understanding that the guy who wrote or directed these movies, like The Manchurian Candidate, The Born Supremacy, kind of exposing all these like intel operations and turning them into movies. This guy like killed himself eventually or died in a hotel mysteriously, right? As people in the Hollywood business are off to do. Before I get into clips, before we even get into the further like methodology and like practices of MK Ultra and its roots, we should talk about something called a limited hangout, which is what some of these movies that put these like real life programs and operations into our consciousness as fiction. This is what they kind of are doing. It's like a admittance of the CIA, because the CIA itself admitted that it was doing MK Ultra experiments in 1975, and in 1975, when they were forced to admit it, I think by a citizen journalist or something like that. They said those experiments had ceased. That was just a lie. I don't know if the government lies, the deep state lies, the CIA lies, the FBI lies, and they'll say half the time it's for national security, or they will, or all the time it's for national security, right? But the limited hangout is basically where information is disclosed about operations or intel or methodology, but the entire scope is not given to the public or to the person that it's being disclosed to. So you get the feeling like, oh wow, like, well, of course the CIA had to cover this up, but now we know, it's the full extent isn't realized, right? So they'll tell you that, okay, maybe we were hypnotizing people and giving them LSD without them knowing, without their will. But they won't tell you what they were trying to do it for, or why they stopped doing it actually, because they could get sued by Americans, right? Because Americans might remember and start, getting litigious. But there's two separate sources from two different points in time, two different people who, with their research, linked the CIA to the beginnings of our like entertainment industry, right? Robert Seffer, who we talked about, his grandpa's a Nazi. Robert Seffer is the anthropologist. His grandpa's a Nazi. He thinks the Aryan people are the Atlanteans and are the white Europeans, so they're the progenitors. That's his like. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? And like I said, some of his research is founded on truth. Like, it's there in the history books that's been omitted or covered up by. It's covered up purposely, right? So, first clip from Robert Seffer explaining MK Ultra's connection to the entertainment industry.
From funding the 1954 animated movie Animal Farm to more recently Transformers and Iron Man. The propaganda comes in many disguises, including patriotic musical lyrics, comic books, and even abstract expressionist art. Sometimes the spin is so subtle, audiences don't even notice the CIA or military intelligence are calling the shots. American operatives aren't the only propaganda artists in the world, of course. They just happen to be the most sophisticated. And propaganda is most impactful when people don't even think it's propaganda. And in actuality, the government has influenced thousands of movies, TV shows, and programming targeting children, portraying certain racial populations as born oppressors, and promoting a woke ideology and antisocial behaviors. Politicians, activist groups, and cultural institutions, including universities and companies like Disney and DreamWorks, are being weaponized because they're deliberately inserting propaganda and social engineering into their content to perpetuate their far-left agendas, including a cultural decline in traditional values and justifying a demographic shift that mainstream media denies is happening.
We have a litigator of 39 years. His YouTube channel is Lionel Nation. It's very not cool of me to get his last name, but I recently stumbled upon his channel because of his content pertaining to Candace Owens and Turning Point USA with Erica Kirk and whatnot. And basically, like, he does all these segments of videos whenever Candace does like a video breaking down the reality of all of it, right? Because he was a lawyer for 39 years. That's longer than I've been alive. Well, he breaks down here in this clip the extent of the CIA's involvement in our entertainment industry. Once again, confirming something that Robert Seffer said, and kind of just highlighting the lack of understanding that's there, basically in the general public for what the CIA actually is and what it does.
One of the earliest documented examples of direct CIA involvement in film was the 1954 animated adaptation of George Orwell's Animal Farm. This is well supported by multiple accounts, including History.com, The Guardian's own reporting, plus animation industry histories. Historical reporting shows that the CIA covertly acquired the rights to the book through intermediaries and financed the production. The ending, of course, was altered. A conspiracy tyros, for lack of a better word, for those who are kind of new to this whole world. You might ask yourself, what is all this talk about the CIA? Do they really involve themselves with talk shows and podcasting? And would they be involved in all of this connection as to gate schools and, recruiting and grooming? Is this that conspiracy tinfoil stuff going a little nuts? You don't even know the half of it.
So MK Ultra, which we'll be talking about 3 main MK programs that the CIA admitted to and disclosed: MK Ultra, MK Often, and MK Monarch, which was disclosed as recently as December 2024 as a real thing that the CIA took part. All of these are real things that the CIA took part of, and as I should have done this at the beginning of the episode, this is a disclosure that a lot of the content we'll be discussing today is extremely disturbing, graphic, and could be triggering if you've experienced abuse in your past. So there's my disclaimer. But I should say, if you've ever attended a gifted and talented or GATE program, or have suffered like repeated abuse and torturing to the point that you've suffered memory loss, then you should still watch this program, because there's survivors that I've gathered clips from that basically explain that your life could be in danger if you don't if you're unable to confront these memories properly, right? So MK Ultra, the whole brainwashing mechanism basically originates from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is where the mystery schools originate from, and the secret societies that we were talking about. They do these same methods in their orders to it's rituals, right? It's where for somebody who's just walking into this from like 12th grade science, you're not going to understand the power of belief. The world as it was before biblical understanding, right? Before Newton, before Plato. We're talking about thousands of years ago, maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago. These torture and brainwash methods originated from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which basically the methods revolved around sexual rituals, hypnosis through drugs, and just general hypnosis with illusions and other methods, chanting, music, as we'll see. So you get sex, drugs, and hypnosis, those 3. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. If we're considering music hypnosis. And you can see we'll have a seed of where eventually the 1960s rock and roll scene is connected to the MK Ultra goings on and the CIA's assets. So the Manchurian Candidate, right? You would have basically what we now in the conspiracy community consider patsies. Mark David Chapman, Sirhan Sirhan. I wouldn't go as far as to call Dylan Roof a patsy, but I've recently heard by other people doing research in this that his behavior was similar to these other 2 people who have been MK Ultra, right? Mind controlled, brainwash. And I think the book Catcher in the Rye is linked to several of these incidences. We have I'll try and find a good and relevant clip of this person who's been doing investigation into the CIA's involvement with Catcher in the Rye and other forms of media being linked to Manchurian Candidate assassinations, right? So Um, I did post a clip a few days ago, maybe just Wednesday, kind of highlighting this guy. He's a mentalist in the UK. David Brennan, I think his name was, attempting for his show in the UK to basically imitate some of the CIA's methodology into making a toy soldier, a remote control killer, right? And once again, revelation of the method, taking it back to something I saw on The Simpsons. This is early Simpsons. This was in the show, I think maybe before I was even mentally cogent, if not before I was born, right? There's an episode where Sideshow Bob, I don't know if it's his first or second appearance, but he's scorned by Bart's like TV hero, Krusty the Clown. So to get back at Krusty the Clown, he brainwashes Bart to basically be like a mind control robot to go up and hug Krusty, but he had a bomb on him and he was going to blow up Bart Simpson and Krusty the Clown. But they stopped it or whatever in the episode. This is The Simpsons, 1991, right? You go back to, like I'm saying, Mark David Chapman. I think he was found at the scene sitting down, just out of it, right? So let's play this clip that I posted, David Brennan. It's a bit of a long clip, but it'll give you more of an idea of how something like this could happen. And this guy is not even using drugs or sexual abuse like some of these other programs and people do. Just using the power of suggestion on somebody who's highly suggestible. Here's the clip.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's experiment, which asks, is it possible to program somebody to kill? In order to condition Chris to become an assassin, I'll be using brainwashing techniques allegedly employed by the CIA's MK Ultra program in the 1960s. In the second part of the assassin programming process, I'm going to create gaps in Chris's memory. A form of spontaneous amnesia designed to make him forget his actions if and when he attempts the assassination. Sirhan claims that he has no memory of killing Bobby Kennedy.
I have never been able to remember what happened in that place at that time, but I have not been able to remember many things and incidents which took place in the weeks leading up to the shooting.
That. And also, to be able to go into the trance with your eyes open. I want you to look at this pattern. And as you look at that, I want you to go into the trance, but keep your eyes open. You will have absolutely no memory of anything that occurs during the time that you're in the state. And whenever you see this polka dot design, whether it's on a screen like this or on a handkerchief or anywhere, you will move
instantly and comfortably into this trance state.
Has the language
target is Stephen Fry.
And the French have absolutely no interest, the rest of France, in saving it. Indeed, I went to visit the Académie Française, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is a very extraordinary institution. The Académie Française is for these ancient people who are great minds and thinkers, and they decide which words are allowed into the French language, which words are permissible, which words you might, if you like, say are forbidden, and which words are not forbidden. So they also make words up. Courriel, they decided, would be the word for email. And we're not going to have l'email or l'email. Ordinateur, they decided, would be a computer, an ordinateur. And so they made up, words that were not allowed to enter the French language, which is, let's be honest, it's pissing into the wind. You can't.
So I looked in the comments, and there are some people who say because of it was like on the comments on that video, and there's some people who say because it's like a TV show for the UK, and it looks highly produced, that it could be fake. Fake or not, I think this it was like 40 minutes it's a 40-minute long segment on YouTube. You can find it. David Brennan, The Experiment. Fake or not, I think this is an example of the limited hangout. This is an example of the CIA, and he said it in the episode, the CIA practice methods like that to see if they could create mind-controlled killers, right? So the big sticking point for this whole conversation that's going to link these next two MK programs together would be, I think his name is Tom O'Neill. If not, it's Tim, but I think it's Tom. Tom O'Neill's book took him 20 years to write. 20 years to write. It's called
Here's an answer from
Chaos, right? Chaos by Tom O'Neill. And it was basically him as a journalist stumbling upon what he believed to be the CIA's involvement with Charles Manson and the Manson family. I listened to the entire audiobook. They uploaded it illegally to YouTube one night, and I listened to it in bits and pieces. There were times where I did maybe fall asleep when they kind of got into Jolly West, right? And now it's kind of like a Jolly West was one of the CIA's psychiatrists, right? Involved in trying to make these like killers with amnesia. So basically, and it's a really hard basically to do with this book. It's a long book. There's a lot of details that basically kind of go nowhere because they're meant to. But Manson was on parole, and as he was on parole, he had several parole violations that were known to his parole officer, that were known to the county that he left the county that he was arrested from to go be where the murders were eventually committed, right in Laurel Canyon. And basically, the book insinuates the CIA's involvement in supplying him with the drugs and letting him operate because they were trying to, once again, see if through hypnosis and drug-induced mania, people could be convinced to murder. And that's exactly what happened in the Manson killings. Not only was Sharon Tate and the two people she was in the room with at the time murdered, stabbed to death brutally and all this stuff. There were like satanic drawings on the walls, all this other stuff. And the story, Manson's story, it kind of comes down to, he was trying to start a race war and make it look like black people did it. But it kind of begs the question, why was there satanic symbolism in the first place? And I guess like the people who have studied the Manson case up to this day would say, since Manson had them under this drug-induced influence, he was just trying to get them to see how far the control would go. But one thing that Tom O'Neill doesn't discuss in his book that other people who are familiar with Manson and the people around him would say was that they kind of don't talk about one secret society that is not mentioned because they're super litigious. Excuse me. That would be the church, right? So I don't really know their full name, and I don't want to talk about them too much, but they're apparently satanic, right? Allegedly. And so was Manson. And I don't know, I'm not going to get into maybe like Tom O'Neill's involvement, but he was allowed to put out the book basically tying the CIA's involvement, right? So, editing room, Gilbert. I want to mention that I kind of neglected to connect the Laurel Canyon music scene to the MK Ultra programming, but I meant to do that when I brought up Charles Manson. Some of the people hanging around Charles Manson were people like the Beach Boys, Jack Nicholson, who had tunnels under his house that led to Hugh Hefner's mansion. But more specifically, right? So I want to say the Beach Boys hung around Charles Manson. One or two of them were involved with two other people who were involved with Charles Manson. And they just wanted to have sex with as many women as they could have. But they were taking advantage of Charles Manson and all the women that he had around him all the time. And after people started turning up dead, people like Jack Nicholson and the Wilsons, right? They removed themselves from Manson's vicinity and tried to cut all ties going forward. Later on, one of the Beach Boys would die after attempting to dive into his pool from a weird angle, and he was super, super drunk. People nearby or close to him said he never seemed to live down the guilt of what happened to the Manson family's victims. You have the CIA with drug experiments, admitting to drug experiments up until 1975, right? Midnight Climax, where they were drugging their own officers and other people in brothels. Saran, who can't remember the killing of Robert Kennedy. And there are other people who say that he wasn't the one who actually did it. There was one of the security guards who was right there next to Robert Kennedy, or maybe one of the cooks. The same thing with Chapman. I've listened to so many MK Ultra CIA podcasts back to back, but basically one of them suggested that basically a gun will go off further away if they can't, because I think what I said on the first episode of the news tonight is that there are fail safes, so that maybe if the main focus, the patsy, doesn't go through with the killing, other people nearby are ready to finish the job, basically, because that's what they're there for, right? So, if they whether or not they're successful, they take the fall, and the real shooter is never found, right? We kind of said this with the first episode. So, yeah, the Catcher in the Rye, it's funny because that actually is the inspiration for the book that I'm writing about COVID. And I'm slightly disturbed to find out that its writer was basically maybe like involved with CIA traffickings and ongoings, you know. But if we can put a pin on that, right? You have to. A lot of what I would talk to people just that I will work with about what the CIA does or what the government does. A lot of the pushback you get is like, Gilbert, the CIA, the government is an organization full of hundreds of people. How would you get one person not to leak it? Yeah, right? That's like it's because all it would take is one person to leak the information. It's impossible for the whole thing to exist, right? Not accounting for the fact that they do leak the information themselves. And I would like to talk about an experiment the CIA. I don't know if it's a induction test like for agents, but it's a known CIA experiment. Basically, I guess they'll let the rookie or the new guy into the room. This is something they did at the time. And there would be 4 other agents there. And they would look at the shape of a circle on the wall. And the tester would come up to the agents and ask the first agent, what is that shape? And the agent would be like, well, that's a square. And the rookie is like, what the fuck? That's a circle. So like they go down the line and every agent says it's a square. And all these agents are in on it. They know they have to say it's a square. But the rookie, he's the one being experimented on. So finally when he gets to him, he says it's a square, even though it's clearly a circle. And that's the CIA shape experiment. Basically indicating that like human mob mentality like is so overwhelming that even the most logical people usually will cave and give into it. And that's how a lot of this wrongdoing and just madness is perpetrated and gotten away with all the time, every day, even now, as you're watching this probably. God willing, hopefully not at some point in the future, but we'll see, right? So after MK Ultra, we have and I do want to say somebody else I've covered in the past recently, Kirby Summers, who's a survivor of being trafficked by these billionaires and secret societies. She confirms the MK Ultra existence. Basically, like the head of Harvard psychology was buddy with a certain spy, and yeah, like they're like he like, you know, rubbing elbows and stuff like that. So from MK Ultra, we go to MK Often, which was the military's experiments with black magic and even voodoo. They wanted to see if these things were capable of being utilized in a military application, right? So we just had suggestions so far on hypnosis, like repeated phrases. You get some down on his luck guy who's kind of like, for lack of a better word, is a simpleton, right? And I'm not claiming to be a fucking Jimmy Neutron brain blast genius. I could easily be part of a limited hangout without me knowing it. Say all that to say that, right? Although I would like to receive some kind of payment if I'm being fucking used. I've always vocalized that I'll take payment, right? Because what the fuck? But no, I'm very, very much not receiving payment from any agency or entity. I'm just telling the truth because it needs to be told, right? So, MK Often, we go back to Michael Aquino, and I did discuss him very shortly, basically being involved with ritual child abuse, right? I went back to a channel. I've never checked this channel out. I recently stumbled upon it while I was doing research on this stuff. And you'll find that because Mr. Michael Aquino was an actual colonel in the U.S. Army, was an actual part of the U.S. Army, was the founder of psychological operations and mind war in the U.S. Army, that there's very little conspiratorial content on YouTube, on the internet about him. Which is strange because you would think people would talk about the guy who broke away from Satanism to find a stronger Satanism that was accepted by the military and the head of psychological operations. You would think people would talk about that. I mean, the military stands firm in his service, right? So apparently he's involved with Iran-Contra, just like a certain spy. And remember how I talked about he was involved with like abusing children or whatever, and these children had to witness the killing of animals and killing of maybe other small humans. Some of them actually were contracted some of them actually contracted chlamydia, which would not have happened if they were not sexually abused, right? Some of them were said to have maybe been exposed to AIDS because one of the teachers at this daycare center later died from AIDS. I was holding on to this clip, right? Remember when I said they stopped it in 1975, right? Here's a survivor talking about why it's important. She's going to talk about her experience. It's a longer clip, but once again, it's a very, very important clip to this conversation. And she's going to talk about her experiences, first off, and basically say that people who are involved in this program and possibly involved in the gifted and talented and gay programs throughout America could be susceptible to dangerous directives that were installed during the time of hypnosis that could cause them to harm themselves or end their lives based on if they try to remember this stuff. Because apparently people who are in these gifted and talented programs find it hard to remember what went on in them. I was also in gifted and talented for a little bit. I barely remember. Some of them say some people talk about a pink drink. I don't remember any pink drinks. I remember wearing headphones for an exercise. I remember, and that's basically it. I really couldn't tell you anything other than maybe I was inducted twice, and the first time they had to let me go because I was sobbing because I felt the vibe was off, right? So they brought me back anyways, and who knows what they did. But here's the Jimmy Dore clip. Jimmy Dore show, right? Excellent place for news. You can't discredit him. His facts are there. It's talking to a survivor of this program. She says she was sold by her own father into the program in the 50s. And she's here 70 years later as a survivor to help people make people aware of what the CIA was doing, might still be doing, and warn people that if they got away from this programming or don't remember it, that they should be careful when trying to remember it because here.
Happen, the government wouldn't do this. You're talking about the CIA, for God's sake. And it really wasn't until December 23rd of 2024, what's that, 6 months ago?
Yeah.
That actually they released this. And this is a complete confession of what they did, who they did, how they did it, and talks about why they were doing the program, how it was started in conjunction with the Eli Lilly drug company in Switzerland, who donated tons of LSD to the CIA, and also
yeah, and
yes.
So I forgot about this until I started seeing these because I was looking for UFO stuff. That's how I found all this.
So
well, communicating with UFOs was part of what they were having.
We have shows.
What?
Oh, wow.
Tell me about that.
Well, when I was about 7, I was living in California, and I would be taken to a beach south of Tijuana called Rosarita Beach. And down there is the Autonomous University of Mexico. And a group of kids, we'd be naked for weeks, running around like savages. And every night there would be some kind of ritual going on led by this senator. And sometimes the governor of California was down there as well. And the goal was to sacrifice. So they sacrificed kids from the orphanages. I understand they didn't sacrifice me because I was a bloodline child. I was part of the family. And we'd stand on the beach at night and start seeing UFOs approaching us, and and everybody was on drugs, and it wasn't just LSD. They developed all kinds of drugs to affect people's minds. But there was communication. It felt that way. Was that true? I was a naked, half-starved 7-year-old child. My hair got so filthy and full of sand they had to shave it off. But that's what they were doing, and it was all about moving the energetic body. And they had a real copy of Mein Kampf.
So they say, let me ask you, they say that they stopped this MK Ultra stuff in 1973. Now, why would I believe that they did that? Do you believe that they did that?
Oh, no, not at all. It's gotten increasingly sophisticated. And there's a note from one of them to another of them calling a meeting saying we've got to stop abusing Americans. Some of them are gonna survive and they're gonna sue us. And they couldn't have that. So the solution about that time was not to stop, but to start importing foreign children. And that's when the foreign children started pouring across the borders, and they decided that it would be all right as long as they were all called Mexicans there. So I also wanted to see this, that when you do start to remember, because the way you know you've been programmed is that you can't remember it. They developed a whole cadre of drugs and techniques for erasing memories. And when I was 30 years old and started to remember, I could remember nothing. Couldn't remember my mother, my father, my family, nothing. But the thing is, when you do start to remember, they very cleverly programmed you with a suicide program. So as soon as
Omega, yeah.
Yeah, or the Freedom Train, or it's got several variations. And that comes at you so hard and so fast that people are starting to commit suicide before they even know what's going on. So therapists are coming in, and we're doing sessions to say, okay, people have to take control of this coming at them. And I tell them to bring it like a thread through an eye of a needle. Don't let the whole mass come at you, or you're going to be in Omega or on the Freedom Train.
I mean, this document you sent me is mind-blowing. I read it, and let me just read a little bit more. I hope that I'm not being rude by reading this while you're here, but it says, while many of the MKUltra projects were conducted in hospitals, laboratories, or other institutional settings like universities, others were carried out in clandestine CIA safe houses staffed not by doctors or clinicians, but by hard-nosed federal narcotic agents like George Hunter White.
So from there, we're going to go to MK Monarch. And Kurt Metzger several times describes people who've gone through MK Monarch. He thought it was fake. I mean, not fake, but you hear about these programs and the CIA, people in charge, people in everyday life never talk about this stuff. So you try to talk about it, you sound like the crazy one. But when the government finally admits that these things take place, then what can you say other than holy shit and what the fuck? Because based on the practices of the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the testimonies of these people who have survived, which I guess also, once again, I if I seem giddy, it's because I'm not. I'm not giddy. We had during the Me Too movement where it was like a psyop where we should believe all women and it's yes, all men, right? And later on, or even before that, we had people telling us their stories about how they're trafficked, abused by their families and people in power, and they're looked at as split personality, crazy, they're liars, right? So here's one of those person's stories being interviewed by a survivor. They're both survivors of satanic ritual abuse. Satanic being the placeholder because it's a lot more complicated than that, as we looked into, right, in the last couple of episodes. Survivors of ritualistic abuse, talking about what they went through. Extremely graphic and disturbing. Please, there's your warning.
Not just sex trafficking, but a lot of different types of violence and torture. Some of it lethal to the participants, murders. So that was also happening. Yeah, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I'm just saying I was basically being trained for constant sexual activity from the moment I was born, like absolutely constant. And that was normalized as much as possible in my household.
And there was a door, a peephole, and there, I know that though it was big enough, and I could see that the person who owned me at the time was watching. Mm. I assumed that it was filmed. I assumed that this was actually a snuff film. Mm-hmm. That I was a child, I was the little child who was naked, and two people were brought in, adults, who were dressed. And I know that I had to kill them. And I felt that they didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that I have a feeling that the film, the snuff film, it was the surprise element was what they were after.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the experience I had that resembles that. But it wasn't really a fair match to tell you the truth, because I had a weapon and they didn't. And of course, yeah, it's maybe hard to think that a child, is capable of that. But then we were trained.
We were, yeah.
So barbiturates and like even rape. That guy was raped since he was a toddler, and every time he tried to tell or made a mistake or did something that cult didn't like, they broke that part of him with more rape and torture, raping his mom in front of him, doing what to break your mind so that you stuff that part of yourself so far down in you that you're just like a new person. And you comply and you do what they say. You get what I'm saying? And that was taken from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, put in these cult societies, from Kabbalistic practices to Nazi experiments to now Scientology and whatever else is going on in the modern world that you can throw a skin over that, right? Basically, what average people would describe as pure evil, But I mean, somebody who loves science enough would just call it science. Anyways, MK Monarch is the extension of both of these programs, Ultra and Often, to basically turn humans into human iPhones, right? That's what Kurt Metzger with the Derp with Kurt on his podcast, that's what he refers to Monarch being. This program where you use shame to hide secrets in people and basically like create split personalities, so where they're outside showing you one thing, but behind the scenes are completely like this tortured, held captive person by their handlers. And one person who notably exposed this and was like endlessly bombarded with like hate and opposition, one could say reasonably so, would be Kanye West. A lot of what Candace Owens has like built her show on has been like the shocking revelation that Kanye West has like shown to the world, basically that people in power get like these handlers, these overseers, these overlords, these managers who basically have all of their rights and lives in their hands and can, at the press of a button, at the drop of a call, right, can make somebody like Kanye West have to take medication, make TMZ make him look like he's the most craziest person that's ever been alive. And Kanye's now known as Ye. His handler was Harvey Pasternak. We can see other examples of people being affected by these evil things, by the people in power, like Amanda Bynes, right? Kirby Summers talked about Virginia Giuffre, who was one of the survivors of the spy, and she was supposed to, I think, testify in court or something last year or this year, but she ended up killing herself. And Kirby Summers kind of alluded to the fact that, you know, sometimes the mind control programming through torture goes away on its own, through like your escape from the program and just living your life. And sometimes it's deep seated and never goes away, like the woman who was talking to Jimmy Dore talked about, how she did manage to escape from programming, but later on ended up in Russia in a basement where she was supposed to be years before, based on her programming. Virginia Giuffre did take her life, and with so many people walking around today bare nakedly responsible for what I've talked about on this podcast times podcast again, right? What I've talked about on this news show times 50, and others have talked about on their show times 150 times over. Because if we're linking all this behavior to Aztecs, right? In the CIA, I don't know, Aztecs in the CIA. Aztecs who sacrificed people by the thousands, right? You had like their priests like coalescing themselves in blood and human tissue, and their dreadlocks would be full of that to the point where they never bathed. That's all they were like covered in. And people who believe in those methods carried it over to the present day. Like, that's like, we're talking on a scale that you, if the government eventually had to stop experimenting on Americans because Americans were remembering, Americans were lawyering up, right? Once again, on the Jimmy Dore clip, what the survivor went on to say was that they just went on to immigrants, people from other countries. And that's where you get maybe some false flags, people who pull false flags, and then all of a sudden we're going to war, you know? There's some people who are, I guess, just in it for the money, just in it for the job, right? Just in it for their house, just in it because they've already been blackmailed, and what can you do, right? But there are others who really believe in American Horror Story level grotesque human sacrifice for power, you know? And I guess just all the research that I've been doing and what these people had said in the clips is that people's genetics are linked to the gate program and to like who these families look for, who the CIA looks for to be influenced, right? Kurt Metzger suggests just because these royal families have dissociation bred into their body more easily, that they've suffered more genetically, so their genetic memory is more built to tolerate the behavior that these cults and orders propagate. I think finally here, before we go to the real news, we can go to Jack Kruse, a neuroscientist who's been exiled for his beliefs on red light and sunlight being almost like a cure-all, and not wanting to propagate the COVID vaccine, you know? I'll see if I can find a better clip, but here's him basically suggesting that MK Ultra has fully been converted to something that affects us all every day when we're looking at our phones, and that the weakest minded of us couldn't even conceive it, or if they know, couldn't care less.
But here's my problem. 55% of the United States population has been MK Ultra'd through the screen technology. So they're all obedient idiots. We are not little furry creatures that live under the ground. We are now mammals with Ferrari engines in our head that absolutely are creatures of light. And it turns out the light that we're not adapted to is blue light. We're exactly the opposite of the little furry creatures that lived under the ground. Why? Because it turns out blue light turns off POMC expression. Guess what is the part of the sun that actually increases pro-opiomelanocortin? UV light.
I mean, it's been known for the past at least like 16 years that we are being monitored at all times on our phones. You know, Edward Snowden broke the news to us, but it was already like insinuated that we were being monitored at all times through our phones. And who's to say that they haven't perfected a form of like creating a state of hypnotic suggestion to where your mind is open to their ideas, and they have your behavior mapped out from so long ago and to such like microscopic detail that now each and your every move for the next 5 years are like mapped out based on your habits, right? That's so far-fetched. That would never be in a Joel Schumacher, Tim Burton movie in the year 2000 or 1999 with Jim Carrey as the star. Now for some real news.
At about 12:45 a.m., police officer Jason Ovia apprehended Holmes behind the cinema next to his car without resistance. Because of his tactical clothing, Holmes was at first mistaken for another police officer. He was described as being calm and disconnected during his arrest.
All of this began. You can see what's happened next. They move on to see what else they can find out about this suspect at his apartment up here. Police have cordoned off the area. The suspect at this point has told them that he does not have anybody else working with him, that he was acting alone. Nevertheless, they seal off the entire mall area to question witnesses, and the ambulances are so overwhelmed, Wolf, that a number of the victims are being driven by the police themselves, some critically wounded, to hospitals trying to save their lives.
One-year-old suspect is in custody in these killings, and Jeff Pegues has learned what police have found in his computer.
Investigators have searched through at least one of Dylan Roof's computers and have no indication that other individuals were involved in last week's shooting. Authorities also continue to analyze a 2,400-word manifesto, trying to figure out how the 21-year-old allegedly turned into a murderer. Officials tell CBS News there is no reason to doubt that Roof is the author of the document, which starts by saying, "I was not raised in a racist home or environment."
Looking the Vegas Strip. Somehow, Stephen Paddock sneaked in 23 guns in 10 pieces of luggage without housekeeping ever raising a red flag. We're also learning more about how the massacre was staged. This illustration shows how Paddock opened fire into the crowd at the 15-acre concert site below, using a two-legged bipod and a gun platform. The killer used a device like this that turns his semi-automatic weapon into a rapid-fire killing machine, as seen in this YouTube video.
Crook's father was spotted in public since the 20-year-old gunman opened fire at former President Donald Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, according to a local business employee and a neighbor who identified him in that picture. So let's play it out for you in full right here on Live Now from Fox.
Why would your son want to kill the president? Back off!
No comment.
No comment!
Were there any warning signs, Matthew? No comment.
How's Mary holding up? No comment.
We'll release a statement when our legal counsel advises us to do so. Until then, we have no comment. We just want to try to take care of ourselves right now. So please, give us our space. Have the feds released?
All right, the father saying that they are not.
A somewhat forgotten part about the Charlie Kirk case was the role that George Zinn played shortly after the shooting. Zinn had attended the rally, and after Kirk was shot, he stood up and said, "I shot him, now shoot me." And this was a false claim, but it attracted a lot of police attention. He was arrested, police searched his phone, and afterwards they found child sex abuse materials on his phone. 4 months later, George Zinn was in court today and he took a plea deal. He pleaded no contest to obstruction of justice for yelling that at the Kirk rally, and he also pleaded guilty to 2 second-degree felonies for possessing that child sex abuse material. The judge sentenced him to spend up to 15 years in prison for these charges. It was an emotional hearing today, and George Zinn asked to read a statement before he was sentenced. He didn't mention anything about the Charlie Kirk shooting or say why he did what he did, but he did say he didn't feel like he was a danger to children or parents, and he was hoping to get therapy and some support while in prison. Police don't believe that George Zinn had anything to do with the shooting, but they say that he diverted these critical resources that were needed in the chaotic aftermath when police were trying to find who the real shooter actually was.
Kirk is shot and killed. Over the next few days, law enforcement and internet investigators pore over the available information to identify the killer. Eventually, they determine it to be Tyler Robinson, and they also realize that Tyler has a transgender romantic partner named Lance Twiggs. Tyler is arrested, Lance cooperates with the police, and then disappears from the public eye.
So what do, fellow Americans? What do? Well, the government already admitted that they do this. There's people in our government right now that know that they do this. They know that the spy was implicated in trafficking children. They know he had clients. His black book is out there on the internet in QR code form. Let me just say, okay, as far as like anybody who's suffering from trauma through repetitive torture, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, those things that were used to mentally program a lot of these people that I talked about this past hour, the research that these people have done, and these people are basically like paperclip Nazis, right? Like, here we go again with the Nazis that the CIA and the military recruited for their information on space, rocketry, and whatever else they were working on, which is psychological experiments, ritualistic abuse, and the like, right? So one thing that they agreed upon, that they found out, was that marijuana was not good for the programming. It could erase the programming, basically. So that's why there's this propaganda effort to make weed seem bad. Or there was for the longest time, right? Just like anything, you overdo anything, it's bad. There's physical, emotional, mental ramifications for abusing anything too much, and not being aware of it. But for the most part, somebody who's never smoked or eaten, or however you want to intake marijuana or THC, if you do suffer from traumatic memories, or specifically if you believe yourself to be suffering from suicidal thoughts related to your past and trauma, I would recommend that you try. I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not a lawyer. Just based off my own experience, because being in the Gifted and Talented program, and the Gifted and Talented program being linked to CIA experimentation, and CIA experimentation going as far as to like include trying out voodoo, doing satanic ritual abuse, all things you heard about today. It's like there's no telling the extent of what they're up to today, right? And I include our phones as an aspect of that. It goes both ways. Like I said, abuse of anything will show and will take its toll on anyone. But you have to be aware when you're being propagandized, right? So it's like I think I want to do an episode on Project Mockingbird, because it's an aspect of MK Ultra. It's an aspect of like how several different, and I've always kind of, since I've been in high school, been obsessed. I think I've brought this up before. Obsessed with the notion of ethos. Like when they brought up pathos, logos, and ethos in English class, I think it was like, I think I was a junior, if not a sophomore. Ethos, kind of learning what ethos was and applying that knowledge to the world, just kind of highlighted the way the world works, the world that I was living in at the time in 2011. That I could just tell how people, and I don't know why it mattered to me. I was just like a 16 or 17-year-old, but I could just tell the inauthenticity of people who listen to people just because of who they were, which is what ethos is. And I could feel that it was misleading, I guess, at the time. That's just me putting my current perspective over the past, right? So, but Mockingbird, how the main news sources influence the smaller news sources, and they're all saying the same thing, and any story that deviates from that is seen as either just not true or unverified, still debated, right? So Mockingbird, right? Just basically it's like I'm saying, it's a part of MK Ultra, but it's a different government operation that was proved to exist as well, and probably through some current iteration, we know it as Mockingbird. It could be some fucking Flamingo or who knows what the fuck, Dark Hole, Operation Donut. People like Stephen Colbert basically becoming the CIA's puppet and reciting their line instead of what he used to do, which is satirize the news and comedy. So Mockingbird, Midnight Climax, the blackmail aspect, which when the spy was already coming down of his usage, it was kind of people who talk about this know that like you wouldn't need past like 2015, you really won't need people like the spy so often, because the government already has access to your phone. They can see who you talk to, where you go, what websites you look at and stuff like that. They know your fucking fetishes. They know where you spend your money. And, you know, so I think they also had MK. I don't know if it's MK Artichoke or Project Artichoke, but the woman in the Jimmy Dore clip basically kind of just explained it's called that because that's like how your mind looks when it's like peeled back or whatever. So you have the scientific aspect, the occult aspect. You can connect like even religions to intelligence, because like how they used to have confessions and stuff like that, and or they still have confession in the Catholic Church. Like the Vatican is its own city and country, if I'm not mistaken. You know what I'm saying? There's like they've gotten child predators out of trouble, and this is all basically to say like it's all just methods of control. MK is like mind control, right? And America is always about being the best and the baddest of everybody doing anything. So when we adopted these Nazi scientists, who knows if the at that point in the 1900s, what I guess I'm trying to say right there is that like the Freemasons are known to have existed, maybe as the founders of our country, and definitely the people who started the Federal Reserve and put all the symbols on the dollar bill. When they inducted Nazis into the ranks, kind of just wondering if it was like cousins who've never met, kind of just like linking up and you know, so if you look at the dollar, that pyramid, it's all power consolidated, and that's like I'm saying, that's what these methods of control are. And they've infiltrated, as I've said in the past couple of episodes, they've infiltrated every aspect. Religious, communities, at the high and low level, to the point where it's like the allegories we see in film become basically one-to-one applications of what's going on in real life, where you try and tell somebody the truth and they become defenders of the system of lies because they can't conceive of a truth that's outside the lie. Like Plato's allegory of the cave, which I hate to be the 1 millionth person on the internet to reference in the supposedly age of Aquarius, but yeah, I can't do all of the research. I hope this was enough to wet your whistle, and maybe you can look into some of the stuff that's there. And hopefully all this episode just serves to keep a lookout into things that could be applied today on us in these same realms of sex, drugs, and hypnosis, rock and roll, or hip hop, which comes from the CIA, right? So, and as I said, I'm not above it. What can I say? Other than thank you for watching this. Thank you for spending time with me. This has been The News Tonight.
With their tanks and their bombs and air bombs and their guns in your head, they are crying in your head, in your head. Zombies now. Sorry, what is in your head?